Let yourself settle in comfortably now, as we begin our story. Take a deep breath, and let it out slowly. We find ourselves on a quiet evening in the English countryside, in the year 1937, where the world moves at a gentler pace, and time seems to slow down like honey dripping from a silver spoon. Willowmere Manor stands gracefully on a small rise, surrounded by ancient oak trees whose branches sway with the softest whisper in the evening breeze. The manor itself is built of warm honey-colored stone that seems to glow in the fading light of late summer. Ivy climbs the western wall in gentle cascades of green, and the mullioned windows reflect the deep amber and rose of the sunset sky. This is a place of peace, of quiet elegance, where nothing hurries and everything exists in perfect, drowsy harmony. The gravel drive curves through manicured lawns where roses bloom in orderly beds, their perfume hanging heavy in the still air. Beyond the formal gardens, the land slopes down to a small lake, its surface smooth as glass, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Swans glide across the water with slow, graceful movements, leaving barely a ripple in their wake. The air is warm but not uncomfortably so, just that perfect temperature that makes you want to close your eyes and drift. Inside the manor, the rooms are appointed with comfortable furniture upholstered in soft fabrics of sage green and dusty rose. Thick Persian carpets muffle footsteps, making movement through the house feel dreamlike and quiet. Oil paintings in gilded frames line the walls, portraits of long-deceased ancestors whose eyes seem to close in eternal sleep. Crystal chandeliers hang from ornate plaster ceilings, their light dimmed to a warm, gentle glow as evening approaches. The library, where we begin our tale, is perhaps the most peaceful room of all. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves line 3 walls, filled with leather-bound volumes whose pages carry the musty, comforting scent of old paper. Tall windows face the gardens, now draped with heavy velvet curtains in a deep burgundy shade. A fire burns low in the marble fireplace, not for warmth but for the gentle, hypnotic dance of the flames and the quiet crackle of burning wood. High-backed armchairs are positioned near the fire, their cushions deep and inviting. Lady Constance Ashworth, the mistress of Willowmere Manor, has invited a small party of guests for the weekend. She herself is a woman of perhaps 60 years, with silver hair arranged in soft waves and kind eyes that crinkle at the corners when she smiles. She moves through her home with the slow, assured grace of someone who has never needed to hurry, her silk dress rustling quietly as she walks. Her voice, when she speaks, is low and melodious, the kind of voice that could lull anyone into peaceful contentment. The house party is a modest affair, just 6 guests besides Lady Constance and her household staff. These are old friends and distant relations, people who have known each other for years, whose presence together feels as comfortable as worn slippers and old quilts. They have gathered for no particular reason beyond companionship and the pleasure of spending a late summer weekend in the countryside, away from the noise and rush of London. The household staff move about their duties with quiet efficiency. Mrs. Pemberton, the housekeeper, is a formidable woman with iron-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, but her efficiency creates a sense of order that is deeply calming. She ensures that every guest has what they need, that fires are lit at just the right time, that tea appears precisely when wanted. The butler, Hastings, is equally competent, a tall man with thinning hair and an impassive face that reveals nothing but professional courtesy. Under his supervision, the footmen and maids perform their duties almost invisibly, like helpful spirits who anticipate every need. The evening meal will be served at 8 o'clock, Lady Constance has announced, giving her guests time to settle into their rooms, to unpack their cases, and to rest before dressing for dinner. The house is filled with that particular kind of peaceful quiet that comes before a social gathering, when everyone is in their own space, engaging in the slow, meditative rituals of preparation. The sound of running water from distant bathrooms, the quiet opening and closing of wardrobe doors, the soft footsteps on carpeted hallways, all contribute to the drowsy, peaceful atmosphere. As the sun sinks lower, the golden light becomes deeper, more amber, slanting through the windows at increasingly horizontal angles. Long shadows stretch across the lawns outside. The swans on the lake drift toward the reeds to settle for the night. In the gardens, birds sing their evening songs, those last sweet notes before silence falls. The temperature is dropping slightly now, just enough to make the indoors seem even more comfortable and inviting. In the drawing room adjacent to the library, someone has arranged fresh flowers in crystal vases. White roses and lavender create a subtle fragrance that mingles with the scent of beeswax polish on the furniture. The grand piano in the corner sits silent for now, its polished surface reflecting the room like dark water. Heavy silk curtains frame the windows, ready to be drawn against the approaching night. Every surface gleams with careful attention, every cushion is plumped and perfectly arranged, creating an environment of absolute comfort and rest. Time moves slowly at Willowmere Manor. There is no rush, no urgency, nothing that cannot wait until tomorrow or the next day. The very stones of the house seem to exhale peace, the accumulated tranquility of centuries of quiet country living. This is a place where sleep comes easily, where dreams are gentle, where the modern world with all its anxieties and hurries feels very far away indeed. Let yourself sink into this feeling now, this sense of being held by a place of complete safety and rest. As the clock in the entrance hall chimes 7 times, its tone deep and melodious, the guests begin to emerge from their rooms and make their way downstairs. Let us meet them now, these players in our gentle drama, each one moving with the slow, drowsy ease of someone on holiday. Colonel Reginald Blackwood is the first to appear in the drawing room. He is a man in his late 60s, retired from military service but still carrying himself with upright posture and measured dignity. His hair is white and neatly trimmed, his mustache carefully waxed, and his evening clothes are of an old-fashioned but impeccable cut. He moves with a slight stiffness in his left leg, a souvenir from the Great War, but he never complains. His voice, when he speaks, has the gravelly warmth of someone who has spent years giving orders but has now softened into a more contemplative mode. He settles into one of the armchairs near the fire with a quiet sigh of satisfaction, crossing his legs at the ankle and gazing into the flames with half-closed eyes. Miss Penelope Worthington descends the stairs next, her hand trailing lightly on the polished banister. She is perhaps 40, tall and slim, with dark hair arranged in fashionable waves. She wears a dress of deep blue silk that rustles as she walks, and a string of pearls at her throat. Penelope is a writer of modestly successful detective novels, published under the name P.M. Worthington to avoid the prejudice against lady authors. She has an observant quality about her, her gray eyes taking in every detail of her surroundings, but this evening even her usual sharpness is softened by the peaceful atmosphere of the house. She accepts a glass of sherry from Hastings with a murmured thanks and settles on the sofa, arranging her skirts with slow, deliberate movements. The Honorable Geoffrey Ashworth, Lady Constance's nephew, arrives with his wife, Eleanor. Geoffrey is 35, fair-haired and pleasant-looking, with an easy smile and a tendency toward indolence that makes him perfectly suited to country house living. He has never felt the need to take up a profession, living instead on a modest inheritance and helping occasionally with the management of family properties. Eleanor, his wife of 10 years, is a pretty woman with auburn hair and a sweet, rather nervous disposition. She clutches her small evening bag as though it might offer protection from something, and stays close to her husband's side, smiling shyly at the others. Dr. Theodore Sinclair enters with the confident stride of a man used to his own authority. He is 50, with dark hair graying at the temples and clever hands that are never quite still. Theodore has a successful medical practice in London, specializing in diseases of the heart, but he has known Lady Constance since childhood and visits Willowmere whenever he can escape the city. There is something slightly intense about him, an energy that seems at odds with the drowsy peace of the manor, but he makes an effort to relax, loosening his shoulders and accepting a whiskey with a nod. Miss Clara Whitfield is the last to join the group. She is Lady Constance's goddaughter, a young woman of 25 with honey-colored hair and large blue eyes. Clara has the dreamy quality of someone whose thoughts are often elsewhere, and indeed she is known for painting watercolors of rather good quality. She drifts into the room like a ghost, her pale pink dress floating around her, and sits at the piano without being asked, beginning to play a soft nocturne by Chopin that seems to make the very air grow thicker and more conducive to sleep. Lady Constance herself makes her entrance when everyone is assembled. She wears burgundy silk with jet beading that catches the light as she moves. Her expression is one of gentle pleasure at seeing her guests comfortable and content. She surveys the scene with satisfaction, her gaze moving from one person to another with genuine affection. "How lovely to have you all here," she says, her voice barely above a murmur so as not to disturb the peaceful mood. "I do hope your rooms are comfortable. We shall have a quiet weekend, nothing too strenuous. I thought perhaps a walk around the lake tomorrow morning, for those who wish it, and then perhaps cards in the afternoon if the weather turns." There are murmurs of approval from the guests. The Colonel nods his agreement. Geoffrey yawns behind his hand, already looking forward to doing as little as possible. Eleanor smiles and relaxes slightly, reassured that nothing will be demanded of her. Dr. Sinclair swirls his whiskey and gazes into its amber depths. Penelope watches everyone with that writer's eye, storing away details of gesture and expression. Clara continues to play, the music washing over the room like a gentle tide. The conversation that follows is desultory, meandering, the kind of talk that requires no effort and could stop at any moment without awkwardness. The Colonel mentions a garden party he attended last month. Geoffrey makes a mild joke about the heat in London driving everyone to the country. Dr. Sinclair asks after Lady Constance's health in a professional but friendly manner. Eleanor compliments the flowers. Penelope mentions she is working on a new novel but finds the plot troublesome. Clara's music continues underneath everything, providing a soothing counterpoint to the voices. Hastings appears silently in the doorway and clears his throat with the softest of sounds. "Dinner is served, my lady." They rise with languid movements and make their way to the dining room, a journey of mere steps through the wide doorway. The dining room is magnificent in its understated elegance. A long mahogany table is set with crisp white linen, crystal glasses that catch the candlelight and silver that gleams softly. Tall candelabras provide illumination, their flames steady and unwavering in the still air. The walls are covered in silk damask of a soft gold color, and more portraits gaze down at the diners with expressions of benign disinterest. They take their seats according to the place cards that Mrs. Pemberton has carefully arranged. Lady Constance sits at the head of the table, with the Colonel to her right and Dr. Sinclair to her left. Geoffrey and Eleanor sit next to each other halfway down, with Penelope opposite them. Clara takes the foot of the table, still looking as though her mind is partly somewhere else, perhaps composing a painting in her imagination. The meal unfolds with the stately pace of a formal dinner in a great house. Footmen in livery serve each course with precision, moving around the table in a choreographed dance of service. There is a cold soup first, vichyssoise served in delicate china bowls. Then comes salmon with a dill sauce, the fish flaking perfectly under the fork. Roast lamb follows, tender and pink, with roasted vegetables and potatoes that are crispy on the outside and fluffy within. A savory of devils on horseback comes next. Finally, there is a syllabub, creamy and sweet, served with thin almond biscuits. Throughout the meal, the conversation continues in that same drowsy, peaceful vein. They discuss inconsequential matters. The quality of the summer weather. A mutual acquaintance who has recently become engaged. The merits of various holiday destinations on the continent. A new production at the theater. Nothing controversial, nothing that might disturb the peaceful digestion of the excellent food. The wine flows freely but not excessively, just enough to add to the general sense of pleasant relaxation. After dinner, the party returns to the drawing room for coffee and liqueurs. The hour is approaching 10 o'clock, and the summer darkness has finally fallen completely. The curtains have been drawn against the night, creating a sense of warm enclosure, of being sealed safely away from whatever lies beyond the walls. The fire has been built up again, and its light flickers across the faces of the guests, making shadows dance gently on the walls. Lady Constance settles into her favorite chair, a high-backed affair upholstered in tapestry that seems almost like a throne. She accepts a small glass of brandy from Hastings and sips it delicately, her eyes half closed in contentment. "I thought we might play some bridge," she suggests, but without any real insistence. Or perhaps Geoffrey could be persuaded to read to us. He has such a pleasant voice for reading aloud. Geoffrey laughs and shakes his head. "I'm far too comfortable to do anything that requires effort," he admits cheerfully. "Perhaps tomorrow, Aunt Constance. This evening I plan to do nothing more strenuous than digest that excellent dinner." "Quite right," agrees the Colonel, who has claimed his earlier position by the fire. "Much too pleasant an evening to exert oneself. I'm perfectly content to sit here and enjoy the company without any organized activity." Dr. Sinclair, however, seems restless. He stands near the mantelpiece, one elbow resting on it, his fingers drumming quietly against the marble. "I wonder, Lady Constance," he says, his voice cutting through the drowsy atmosphere with slightly more energy than seems appropriate, "if I might have a word with you. Privately, if possible. It's a rather delicate matter." A slight tension enters the room, like a single discordant note in a lullaby. Lady Constance's eyes open more fully, and she regards the doctor with a questioning look. "Surely it can wait until morning, Theodore. We're all so comfortable here." "I'm afraid it really should be tonight," Theodore persists, and there's something in his tone that suggests he will not be easily dissuaded. "It concerns a business matter that requires your attention." "I wouldn't ask if it weren't important." Lady Constance sighs, but she is too gracious a hostess to refuse. "Very well. We shall step into the library for a moment. Please excuse us." She rises with her characteristic grace and leads the way through the connecting door into the library, Dr. Sinclair following behind her. The door closes softly behind them, muffling the sound of their voices, though those remaining in the drawing-room can hear the low murmur of conversation, with Theodore's voice occasionally rising in what sounds like agitation. The others exchange glances. Eleanor looks worried, her hands twisting together in her lap. Geoffrey frowns slightly, his usual pleasant expression clouded. Penelope's eyes narrow with interest, the writer in her scenting a story. Clara seems oblivious, humming softly to herself. The colonel maintains his military impassivity, staring into the fire as though nothing has happened. "I do hope everything is all right," murmurs Eleanor. Dr. Sinclair seemed rather upset. "I'm sure it's nothing," Geoffrey reassures her, patting her hand. "Probably just some tedious matter about investments or property. You know how these things are. The doctor is always fussing about something." Penelope sips her coffee thoughtfully. "I wonder," she says, almost to herself. "The doctor has seemed rather on edge all evening. Did anyone else notice?" The colonel grunts. "Fellow's always been high-strung. Comes from dealing with sick people all day, I shouldn't wonder. Bound to affect one's nerves." In the library, the voices have become slightly louder, though the words remain indistinct. There is a sharp exclamation from Lady Constance, unusual enough that it causes everyone in the drawing-room to look toward the closed door. Then silence falls, and after a long moment, the door opens again. Lady Constance emerges first. Her face is pale, and there are 2 spots of color high on her cheeks. Her hand trembles slightly as she raises it to touch the pearls at her throat. Dr. Sinclair follows her out, and his expression is thunderous. For a moment, the peaceful atmosphere of the evening is completely shattered. "Is everything quite all right, Aunt?" Geoffrey asks, rising from his seat with concern. Lady Constance takes a deep breath and visibly composes herself. "Yes, quite all right, Geoffrey. Just a small disagreement about a business matter. Nothing that need concern any of you." But her voice lacks its usual warmth, and her smile is forced. Dr. Sinclair stalks across the room to the sideboard and pours himself another whiskey, a generous measure this time. "I think I shall retire," he announces abruptly. "The journey from London was tiring, and I find I'm not fit company this evening. Please excuse me." He drains half his glass in one swallow and sets it down with more force than necessary before striding from the room without waiting for a response. An uncomfortable silence follows his departure. Lady Constance remains standing, her composure gradually returning but not quite reaching her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she says quietly. "I'm afraid the doctor is under some strain. Please, don't let it spoil the evening." But the spell is broken. The drowsy peace has been disturbed, and though everyone makes an effort to return to their earlier ease, it cannot quite be recaptured. Eleanor looks anxious. Geoffrey appears troubled. Even the colonel seems less settled than before. Penelope watches Lady Constance with undisguised curiosity. Clara alone seems unaffected, still lost in her own dreamy world. Within half an hour, one by one, the guests begin to make their excuses. Eleanor claims a headache. Geoffrey says he should accompany her upstairs. The colonel announces that he too is ready for bed, that the day's journey has caught up with him. Penelope stretches and mentions that she'd like to do some writing before sleep, and Clara drifts away without saying anything at all, simply rising and floating from the room like a ghost. Lady Constance is left alone in the drawing room, standing by the fire, staring into its depths with an expression of deep trouble on her face. After a long moment, she too retires, climbing the stairs slowly, looking every one of her 60 years and perhaps a few more besides. The house settles into nighttime quiet. The servants have finished their duties and withdrawn to their own quarters. Hastings makes a final round, checking that doors are locked and fires are safely banked. Mrs. Pemberton ensures that all is in order before retiring to her room. The footmen and maids seek their beds in the servants' wing, tired from the long day of work. Willowmere Manor grows still and silent. The grandfather clock in the entrance hall strikes 11, its chimes echoing through the empty rooms. In their bedrooms, the guests prepare for sleep. Curtains are drawn. Lamps are extinguished one by one. The house becomes a collection of islands of darkness, each room separate and private. Outside, the night is clear and still. Stars shine brilliantly in the sky, and a half-moon casts silver light across the grounds. The lake reflects the sky like polished obsidian. The gardens are full of shadows and the subtle sounds of nocturnal creatures. An owl hoots from the old oak tree. A fox barks somewhere in the distance. The world is at peace, settling into the deep quiet of the small hours. Inside, everyone sleeps, or tries to. Dreams come, as dreams will, some peaceful and some troubled. The house creaks and sighs as old houses do, the sounds of wood and stone adjusting to the cooling night air. Time passes slowly, marked by the patient ticking of numerous clocks, the quarter hours and half hours chiming softly, lulling, peaceful, constant. Nothing disturbs the quiet. Nothing except, perhaps, the soft sound of a door opening somewhere on the second floor, barely audible, and quiet footsteps on carpet, and then, much later, that same door closing again. But these sounds are so faint, so easily dismissed as the normal sounds of a house at night, that no one wakes, no one stirs. The night passes peacefully on toward dawn. Morning comes gently to Willowmere Manor, as it always does. The sun rises slowly, painting the sky in shades of pearl and pale gold. Birds begin their dawn chorus, a gradually building symphony of song that grows louder as more and more voices join in. The air is cool and fresh, carrying the scent of dew-laden grass and roses. It promises to be another beautiful day, warm but not oppressive, perfect for a leisurely walk or sitting in the garden with a book. Mrs. Pemberton rises at 6 o'clock, as she has done for 40 years. She dresses in her severe black dress and white apron, pins her hair into its tight bun, and descends to the kitchen to oversee the preparation of breakfast. The cook is already at work, the range heating, the smell of baking bread beginning to fill the warm kitchen. 2 maids arrive sleepily to receive their instructions. The household machinery of a great house begins to turn, smooth and efficient. By 7 o'clock, footmen are carrying breakfast trays to those guests who prefer to take their morning meal in their rooms. Others will come down to the breakfast room when they're ready. There is no fixed time for breakfast at Willowmere. Guests may eat whenever they wish between 7 and 10. It is one of Lady Constance's rules that house parties should be comfortable and flexible, not regimented. The first to descend is, as usual, Colonel Blackwood. Old military habits die hard, and he has been awake since 6, has shaved and dressed, and is ready for the day. He makes his way to the breakfast room, where a generous buffet has been laid out on the sideboard. There are covered chafing dishes keeping eggs, bacon, sausages, and kippers warm. There is toast in silver racks, butter and marmalade, a pot of porridge, a bowl of fresh fruit. The colonel helps himself to a substantial plate and settles at the table with a newspaper that Hastings has thoughtfully ironed flat to remove the creases. Geoffrey and Eleanor appear next, both looking rather heavy-eyed, as though they haven't slept well. Eleanor takes only tea and toast, claiming her stomach is unsettled. Geoffrey is more hearty in his appetite but quiet, not his usual cheerful self. They sit together at one end of the table, speaking in low voices. Penelope Worthington comes down at 8:30, looking crisp and alert despite the late evening. She has already been up for an hour, working on her novel in her room, and her writer's discipline has given her an air of purpose that the others lack. She takes coffee, black and strong, and some scrambled eggs, and eats quickly while reading her own notebook, making occasional marks with a pencil. Clara drifts in around 9, looking ethereal in a white morning dress, her hair loosely pinned up. She takes only tea and a piece of fruit, sitting by the window and gazing out at the gardens as though she's seeing a completely different world than the one the rest of them inhabit. Lady Constance does not appear. This is unusual enough that Mrs. Pemberton notices and frowns. Her ladyship is an early riser, normally appearing by 8 o'clock at the latest. By 9:30, the housekeeper's frown has deepened, and she quietly instructs one of the maids to go up and check on Lady Constance, to ensure she hasn't been taken ill in the night. The maid, a young woman named Annie, taps quietly on Lady Constance's door. There is no answer. She taps again, a little louder. "My lady? Are you awake?" It's past 9:30. Still no answer. Annie hesitates, then slowly turns the handle and pushes the door open just a crack. "My lady?" And then Annie screams. It's a piercing sound that shatters the morning peace like glass breaking. It echoes through the house, bringing everyone running. Mrs. Pemberton arrives first, surprisingly fast for a woman of her size, and pushes past the frozen maid into the bedroom. One look, and her face goes white. "Dear God in heaven," she whispers. The guests arrive in various states of undress and confusion. Geoffrey is still in his shirt sleeves. Penelope has her notebook still clutched in one hand. The colonel moves with surprising speed despite his stiff leg. Clara floats along behind the others, seeming more curious than alarmed. Mrs. Pemberton bars the doorway with her body, her face grim. "No one is to enter," she commands, her voice brooking no argument. "Colonel Blackwood, if you would be so kind as to send someone for the police immediately. And we must find Dr. Sinclair." "What's happened?" Geoffrey demands. "Is it Aunt Constance? Is she ill?" Mrs. Pemberton's jaw tightens. "I'm afraid Lady Constance is dead, sir. And from the looks of things, it wasn't natural causes." A stunned silence greets this announcement. Eleanor gasps and clutches at Geoffrey's arm. Penelope's eyes widen. Clara's dreamy expression doesn't change at all, which is somehow more disturbing than any reaction would be. The colonel's military training asserts itself, and he nods curtly. "Right. Hastings. Telephone for the police at once. Tell them it's urgent. Mrs. Pemberton, perhaps the ladies should go downstairs. No need for them to be up here." "What about Dr. Sinclair?" Penelope asks quietly. "Someone should tell him." "I'll fetch him," Geoffrey volunteers, and he hurries down the corridor to the doctor's room, which is at the far end of the guest wing. He knocks firmly on the door. Theodore. Theodore, wake up. Something terrible has happened. There's no response. Geoffrey knocks again, harder. Theodore. He tries the handle and finds the door unlocked. He pushes it open. Dr. Theodore Sinclair's room is empty. The bed has clearly been slept in, the covers are thrown back, but there is no sign of the doctor himself. His clothes from the previous evening are draped over a chair. His medical bag sits on the dresser. But the man himself is nowhere to be seen. Geoffrey searches the room quickly, even checking the bathroom and the wardrobe, though it's obvious the doctor isn't there. He returns to the corridor, his face troubled. He's not in his room, he reports. The bed's been slept in, but he's gone. Gone where? The colonel demands. Did he go out for a walk perhaps? At this hour? Without dressing? Penelope points out. His evening clothes are still in his room. Mrs. Pemberton's expression becomes even more severe. We need to search the house and grounds, she says grimly. Hastings, organize the footmen and the groundskeeper. Check everywhere. It takes just over an hour for the police to arrive from the nearby market town. During this time, the household is in a state of controlled chaos. The guests have been asked to remain in the drawing room, though none of them seem inclined to wander. Eleanor is weeping quietly, her face buried in a handkerchief. Geoffrey sits beside her, pale and stunned. The colonel stands by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the peaceful gardens with an expression of grim disapproval. Penelope sits very still, her sharp mind obviously working through what has happened. Clara remains in her own world, gazing at nothing in particular. The search for Dr. Sinclair has yielded nothing so far. He is simply not in the house, not in the gardens, not in any of the outbuildings. It's as though he has vanished into thin air. His car is still in the garage, so he hasn't driven away. The groundskeeper reports that all the gates were locked last night and are still locked, and there's no sign that anyone has climbed over the walls. It is all very mysterious and very disturbing. Hastings serves tea that no one really drinks. Mrs. Pemberton stands guard at the bottom of the stairs, ensuring that no one goes up to the second floor. The servants huddle in the kitchen, whispering among themselves, frightened and shocked. The household that was so peaceful yesterday evening has been completely disrupted. When the police car finally crunches up the gravel drive, there is almost a collective sigh of relief. Someone official is here now, someone who will know what to do, who will restore order and make sense of this nightmare. Inspector William Morrison is a man in his early 50s, tall and spare with iron-gray hair and shrewd blue eyes that miss very little. He moves with deliberate care, not rushing, taking everything in. He is accompanied by a younger man, Sergeant Davies, who carries a black bag containing the tools of their trade and a notebook for recording information. Mrs. Pemberton meets them at the door, and her relief at their arrival is palpable. "Thank goodness you're here, Inspector. It's a terrible business, terrible." Lady Constance, dead in her bed, and Dr. Sinclair vanished without a trace. Inspector Morrison's bushy eyebrows rise slightly. "Dr. Sinclair? Who is he?" "One of the house guests, sir. A physician from London. He and Lady Constance had some sort of disagreement last evening, and this morning he can't be found anywhere." "I see," says Morrison slowly, his tone giving nothing away. Well, suppose you show me where Lady Constance is, and then we'll talk to everyone about what happened last evening and this morning. He follows Mrs. Pemberton upstairs, Sergeant Davies trailing behind. The housekeeper opens the door to Lady Constance's bedroom, and the two policemen enter, closing the door behind them for privacy. The bedroom is large and beautifully appointed, with walls covered in silk of a soft cream color. A four-poster bed dominates the room, its curtains tied back, revealing Lady Constance lying against the pillows. She is dressed in her nightgown, her silver hair spread on the pillow, and at first glance, she might simply be sleeping peacefully. But closer inspection reveals the truth. Her face is slightly cyanotic, with a bluish tinge around the lips. Her eyes are half open, the pupils fixed. There is a faint smell in the room, something chemical beneath the usual scents of perfume and lavender. Inspector Morrison approaches the bed slowly, his hands clasped behind his back so as not to disturb anything. He leans forward, examining Lady Constance without touching her, his experienced eyes noting every detail. After a long moment, he straightens and turns to Sergeant Davies. "Well, Davies, what do you make of it?" The younger man swallows nervously. "Poisoning, sir." "Very likely," Morrison agrees. "Note the coloration, the way she's lying. No signs of struggle. She was in bed when it happened. And that smell, can you detect it? Bitter almonds, very faint. Cyanide?" Davies suggests, scribbling in his notebook. "Possibly, though we'll need the doctor to confirm. Now, let's look around without disturbing things too much." Morrison begins a methodical examination of the room. He notes the water glass on the bedside table, still half full. He observes the bottle of sleeping tablets near the lamp, prescribed by a London physician. He checks the window, which is locked from the inside. He examines the door, noting that there's no key in the lock. The door was unlocked when the maid found her, Mrs. Pemberton offers from the doorway, where she's been waiting. That's not unusual. Her ladyship didn't like to feel locked in. Morrison nods slowly. "And this Dr. Sinclair who's gone missing. Tell me about him." Mrs. Pemberton provides a succinct summary of the doctor's friendship with Lady Constance, his arrival yesterday afternoon, and the tense scene in the library after dinner. "Her ladyship was quite upset when they came out," she says. "Not like herself at all. And the doctor was angry, very angry. He drank his whiskey down almost in one go and went straight upstairs." "Did anyone see him after that?" "Not that I'm aware of, sir. The guests all retired fairly soon after. I did my final rounds at 11, and all was quiet. The house was locked up for the night." "And this morning?" "The young maid, Annie, found her ladyship when she went to check on her at 9:30. Annie screamed, and I came running. I could see at once that her ladyship was dead, and something wasn't right about it. Then when we went to fetch Dr. Sinclair, he was gone." Morrison considers this, his face expressionless. "I'll need to speak with all the guests individually. And the servants. But first, let's have a look at this Dr. Sinclair's room." They proceed down the corridor to Theodore's room. Everything is as Geoffrey found it earlier. The bed slept in, the evening clothes laid out, the medical bag on the dresser. Morrison examines the bag carefully. It contains the usual instruments and supplies a physician might carry, including several bottles of medications. He notes each one in his mind, recognizing most of them, but knowing he'll need an expert opinion on some of the more specialized drugs. His day clothes are gone, Morrison observes, checking the wardrobe. So he dressed and left. But where did he go, and why? And when? He steps to the window and looks out. The room faces the side garden, and below is a stretch of ivy-covered wall. Possibly could have climbed out and down, he muses. Though it would be a risky business for a man of 50. Why would he climb out a window when the house doors were available? Davies asks practically. Good question, Sergeant. Why indeed? Morrison turns back to survey the room. Let's go and talk to these guests. Start building a picture of what happened here. Inspector Morrison conducts his interviews in the library, that peaceful room where the argument occurred the previous evening. He has arranged for the guests to be brought to him one at a time, giving him the opportunity to observe each person's reactions and compare their accounts of the evening's events. The first to be interviewed is Colonel Reginald Blackwood. The old military man sits ramrod straight in his chair, his hands resting on his knees, and answers the inspector's questions with precision and economy. I arrived yesterday afternoon at approximately 4 o'clock, the colonel begins. Lady Constance was an old friend. We served together, in a manner of speaking, during the war. Different capacities, of course, but our paths crossed frequently. I've been a guest at Willowmere many times over the years. And last evening? Morrison prompts gently. Dinner was pleasant enough. Good food, good wine, agreeable conversation. Nothing out of the ordinary until we retired to the drawing room for coffee. That's when Dr. Sinclair asked to speak with Lady Constance privately. They went into the library, this very room, and we could hear them talking. The doctor's voice became raised. I couldn't make out the words, but he was clearly agitated about something. How did Lady Constance seem when they emerged? The colonel frowns, remembering. Distressed. Pale. Her hands were shaking slightly, though she tried to hide it. She's normally a woman of considerable composure, so it was quite noticeable when she was rattled. The doctor was angry, furious even. He poured himself a drink and announced he was going to bed, then left rather abruptly. It put rather a damper on the evening, I must say. Did you hear any of their conversation? Any words at all? I heard Lady Constance exclaim, "Absolutely not," at one point. And the doctor said something about time running out, or perhaps it was, no more time. I couldn't swear to the exact words, but it was something of that nature. And after the doctor left the room? We all made polite conversation for a short while, but the mood was spoiled. Within half an hour, everyone had retired. I went up to my room around 10:30, read for a bit, and was asleep by 11. I heard and saw nothing unusual during the night. What time did you wake this morning? 6 o'clock, as usual. Old habits from my army days. I dressed, came down for breakfast around 7. Lady Constance hadn't appeared, but that didn't alarm me initially. I thought perhaps she was sleeping late after the upset of the evening. It was only when Mrs. Pemberton sent the maid up at 9:30 that we discovered the terrible truth. Morrison makes notes, then asks, "What was your impression of Dr. Sinclair? Had you met him before?" Once or twice at previous gatherings. Always seemed a capable sort of chap, good at his profession from what I understand. Bit high-strung, perhaps. Not really my sort, if I'm honest. Too much nervous energy. But I had no reason to think him capable of anything like this. Like what, Colonel? Morrison asks mildly. The Colonel looks uncomfortable. Well, murder, Inspector. That's what we're talking about, isn't it? Lady Constance didn't die in her sleep of natural causes, and the doctor who argued with her is conveniently absent. It doesn't take a detective to put two and two together. Morrison says nothing to this, merely thanks the Colonel and asks him to send in the next guest. Miss Penelope Worthington enters with the confident stride of someone used to observing rather than being observed. She settles in her chair and regards the inspector with interest, as though he's a character in one of her novels. I understand you write detective fiction, Miss Worthington, Morrison begins. I do, Inspector. I've published 7 novels under the name P.M. Worthington. Perhaps you've read them? I'm afraid not, though I've heard they're quite good. Tell me, in your professional opinion as someone who writes about murders, what do you make of this situation? Penelope considers the question seriously. If I were writing this, Inspector, I would say it's too obvious. The quarrel in the evening, the missing doctor, the poisoning in the night. It's almost theatrical in its setup. Real murders are rarely so neatly arranged. An interesting observation. Tell me about your evening. I arrived yesterday afternoon, around 4:30. I've known Lady Constance for about 5 years. She was very kind to me when my first novel was published, and we've corresponded regularly. She invited me here for a quiet weekend, though I had the sense she wanted to discuss something with me. She seemed rather preoccupied, even before the incident with Dr. Sinclair. Preoccupied how? Distracted. As though something was weighing on her mind. During dinner, she was a gracious hostess, but I caught her staring into space several times, not really listening to the conversation. And once or twice, I saw her looking at Dr. Sinclair with what I can only describe as apprehension. Before the argument in the library? Yes. Almost as though she was expecting something unpleasant from him. Morrison leans forward slightly. Did you hear any of their conversation? Only fragments. The doctor said something about papers that needed to be signed. And Lady Constance said she wouldn't be forced into anything. The doctor's response was quite sharp. He said something about consequences, about other people being affected by her stubbornness. Then she raised her voice and said absolutely not, and that's when we all heard her clearly. What did you do after they emerged from the library? I watched them. The writer's habit, I'm afraid. Lady Constance was shaking, genuinely distressed. The doctor was cold with fury, the kind of anger that's controlled but intense. He poured whiskey and drank it down, then announced he was retiring. Lady Constance apologized to all of us, said the doctor was under strain. We all pretended nothing was wrong for a few minutes, but it was impossible. The evening ended shortly after. Did you retire to your room then? Yes, around 10:40. I worked on my novel for about an hour, then read for a while before turning out my light around midnight. My room is at the front of the house, overlooking the drive. I heard nothing unusual during the night. You saw and heard nothing? Penelope hesitates, then says slowly, actually, I did hear something. Around 2 in the morning, I woke briefly. I heard a door close somewhere, quite softly. Then footsteps in the corridor, also soft, as though someone was trying to be quiet. I assumed someone had gone to the bathroom or perhaps couldn't sleep and went downstairs for warm milk. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Man or woman? Could you tell from the footsteps? I couldn't say for certain. They were very quiet. But thinking about it now, I'd guess they were a man's footsteps. Heavier than a woman's would be, though not heavy enough to wake everyone. Morrison makes a careful note of this. Did you hear them return? No, I fell back asleep almost immediately. Thank you, Miss Worthington. You've been very helpful. Geoffrey and Eleanor Ashworth are interviewed together, at Eleanor's insistence. She clutches her husband's hand throughout and barely speaks above a whisper. Geoffrey provides his account of the evening, which largely matches what the others have said. Aunt Constance was like a mother to me, he says, his voice thick with emotion. My own mother died when I was young, and Aunt Constance stepped in. She was endlessly generous, endlessly kind. I can't believe she's gone, and in such a horrible way. I understand she allowed you to live on one of her estates. Morrison asks gently. Yes, Ashworth Lodge. It's about 20 miles from here. She let us live there rent-free after Eleanor and I married. Said the house needed occupants and she was glad to have family there. We've been managing the estate for her, seeing to the tenants and the farms. Did she provide you with any income beyond the house? Geoffrey shifts uncomfortably. An allowance, yes. Not large, but enough to supplement what little income one have from my father's estate. Why do you ask? I'm simply trying to understand everyone's relationship with Lady Constance. Did she ever threaten to withdraw her support? Never. She would never do such a thing. Aunt Constance was family, Inspector. She cared about us. Eleanor suddenly speaks up, her voice trembling. Is it true Dr. Sinclair has disappeared? They're saying he might have, that he might have killed her. We're still investigating, Mrs. Ashworth. At this point, we simply don't know what happened. Did either of you hear anything unusual during the night? Both shake their heads. Our room is at the back of the house, Geoffrey says. We sleep quite soundly usually. Though last night, Eleanor had trouble sleeping after the upset with the doctor. I took one of my sleeping powders, Eleanor admits. The doctor in London prescribed them for my nerves. So I slept very heavily and heard nothing at all. And you, Mr. Ashworth? I woke once, around 3 or 4, I think. Needed the bathroom. I saw nothing unusual. The house was quiet and dark. I went back to bed and slept until morning. Morrison interviews Miss Clara Whitfield next. The young woman seems to drift into the library like a ghost, her pale dress and vague expression giving her an otherworldly quality. I paint, she says dreamily in response to Morrison's questions. Watercolors mostly. Landscapes and flowers. Lady Constance was my godmother. She's been very encouraging of my art, even though my parents think it's a waste of time. Did you notice anything unusual last evening? Clara considers this for a long moment, as though searching through layers of memory. Dr. Sinclair was angry. His aura was dark red, almost black. Very turbulent. Morrison blinks. His aura. Yes, I can see them sometimes. People's auras. Their energy. Dr. Sinclair's was disturbed all evening, even before he talked to Lady Constance. And hers was grey, like she was sad or frightened. Morrison decides not to pursue this line of questioning. Did you hear their conversation in the library? No, I was playing the piano. But when they came out, Lady Constance's aura was fractured. Like broken glass. And the doctor's was burning, red and black flames. I've never seen anything like it. What time did you go to bed? Around 10:30. I went to my room and painted for a while. Sometimes I paint at night, when the house is quiet. I lose track of time when I paint. Did you hear anything unusual? I heard music, Clara says simply. Around 2 in the morning. Not real music, but the music of the house. The way old houses sing when everyone is asleep. And I heard footsteps, but footsteps are normal at night in a house this size. Whose footsteps? I don't know. I didn't look. I was painting. Morrison thanks her and lets her drift away. He sits back in his chair and rubs his eyes. Sergeant Davies looks up from his notebook. What do you make of it all, sir? I make that we have a dead woman, a missing doctor who argued with her hours before her death, and a house full of people who all heard things but saw nothing. It would be easy to conclude that Dr. Sinclair poisoned Lady Constance and then fled. But something about it doesn't sit right. What, sir? If you're going to murder someone and flee, why sleep in your bed first? Why not kill her and immediately escape? And how did he get out of a locked house without anyone noticing? And where is he now? His car is still here, the gates were locked, there's no evidence of him climbing a wall or breaking out. It's as though he simply vanished. Perhaps he's hiding somewhere in the house or grounds. Perhaps. But we've searched, and there's no sign of him. No, Davies, there's something we're missing. Something important. As the afternoon wears on, Inspector Morrison continues his methodical investigation. He interviews the servants one by one, building a picture of the household and its routines. Mrs. Pemberton is a font of information, her sharp eyes having missed very little over the years. Lady Constance was troubled lately, she admits. For the past month or so, she seemed worried about something. She received several letters that upset her, though she wouldn't tell me what they were about. And she had several telephone calls that left her distressed. Do you know who the letters or calls were from? Dr. Sinclair, 4-1. I recognized his voice on the telephone twice. The letters, I couldn't say. But there was one from a solicitor in London that she read several times, and after reading it, she locked herself in the library for hours. Did Dr. Sinclair visit often? Not particularly. Perhaps 2 or 3 times a year. But they were old friends, known each other since they were young. There might have been more to it once, if you understand my meaning. Before Lady Constance married his lordship. Morrison does understand. So there was a romantic attachment. Long ago, before the war. But Sir Edmund was the better match, and Lady Constance married him. Dr. Sinclair married as well, though his wife died some years back. They remained friends, though. Or so I thought. You say, thought. Past tense. Mrs. Pemberton purses her lips. That argument last night was vicious, Inspector. I've never heard Dr. Sinclair speak to her that way. Whatever was between them, it had turned bitter. Hastings, the butler, provides a different perspective. I served his lordship for 30 years before he passed, and Lady Constance for 10 years since. She was a good mistress, fair and kind. But she could be stubborn when she'd made up her mind about something. If she believed she was in the right, nothing could move her. Do you know what Dr. Sinclair wanted her to do? I heard only a little of their conversation. Something about signing papers. And Dr. Sinclair said that time was running out, that she was being selfish. Lady Constance said she wouldn't be bullied, that she had every right to dispose of her own property as she saw fit. Her property? Morrison seizes on this. So it was about her estate, her money? So it seemed to me, sir. Morrison decides it's time to examine Lady Constance's private papers. With Mrs. Pemberton's reluctant permission, he searches the desk in the library. He finds the usual household accounts, correspondence with friends, estate management documents. But he also finds several items of particular interest. The first is a letter from a London solicitor, dated 2 weeks ago. It concerns the revision of Lady Constance's will. The letter notes that she has decided to make significant changes to her bequests and asks her to come to London to sign the new document. It mentions that Dr. Sinclair has been informed of her intentions and has expressed strong objections. The second item is a partially burned letter in the fireplace. Morrison carefully retrieves the charred fragments. He can make out only a few phrases: "You must reconsider, think of Robert, he deserves, not too late to change your mind." The third item is hidden at the back of a drawer, wrapped in tissue paper. It's a photograph, old and faded, showing a young Lady Constance and a young man who must be Dr. Sinclair, standing together in a garden. They're smiling at each other with obvious affection. On the back, in faded ink, is written, "Theodore and Constance, Summer 1899. Morrison sits back, pieces beginning to fall into place. He calls for Sergeant Davies. "I need you to telephone this London solicitor. Find out exactly what changes Lady Constance was making to her will. And send a man to check the telegraph office and post office in the village. I want to know if Dr. Sinclair sent any messages yesterday or this morning." While Davies goes to make the telephone call, Morrison returns to questioning the guests. He asks Geoffrey to come back to the library. "Mr. Ashworth, I need you to be completely honest with me. What did you stand to inherit from Lady Constance?" Geoffrey looks uncomfortable. "Under her old will, Eleanor and I would inherit Ashworth Lodge, the house we live in, and an annuity of £500 a year. Not a fortune, but enough to live on comfortably." "And you knew this?" "Yes, Aunt Constance told me years ago. She wanted me to feel secure, to know that we'd be taken care of." "Were you aware that she was planning to change her will?" Geoffrey's face pales. "No." "Was she?" "According to her solicitor, yes." "Did you have any idea what changes she intended to make?" "None whatsoever." "Inspector, surely you don't think—" "I loved my aunt. I would never harm her, certainly not for money." Morrison's expression is neutral. "I'm simply gathering facts, Mr. Ashworth. Now, I understand Dr. Sinclair is a heart specialist. Did he ever treat Lady Constance?" "Not that I know of. She was in excellent health for her age. And do you know a Robert Sinclair? Geoffrey frowns. Robert? No, I don't think so. Wait, is that the doctor's son? His son? I think so. I vaguely remember Aunt Constance mentioning that Dr. Sinclair had a son who was in some kind of difficulty. This would have been several months ago. She seemed concerned about it. Morrison makes a careful note. What kind of difficulty? She didn't say, and I didn't ask. I assumed it was financial. Young men are always getting into debt, aren't they? Sergeant Davies returns with information from the solicitor. Sir, I spoke to Mr. Harrison at Harrison and Blackwell. He confirms that Lady Constance was revising her will. The new will was to be signed this week. Under the new terms, the bulk of her estate, including Willowmere Manor itself, was to be sold, with the proceeds going to establish a charitable foundation for women's education. The family bequests were to be significantly reduced. How significantly? Geoffrey Ashworth was still to receive Ashworth Lodge, but the annuity was reduced to £200 a year. Miss Whitfield was to receive £500 outright instead of the £1,000 per year she was to get under the old will. And there were several other smaller bequests to servants and distant relatives that were either reduced or eliminated entirely. And Dr. Sinclair? Under the old will, Dr. Sinclair was to receive a bequest of £5,000. Under the new will, that bequest was eliminated entirely. Morrison whistles softly. So the good doctor stood to lose £5,000, and several other people were seeing their inheritances reduced. That's quite a motive for murder. But sir, Dr. Sinclair is the one who's disappeared. If he killed Lady Constance, why would he run? It would make him look guilty immediately. Unless, Morrison says slowly, he didn't kill her. Unless someone else did, and Dr. Sinclair's disappearance is part of the murder, not the aftermath of it. Davies looks confused. I don't follow, sir. Think about it. Everyone knows Dr. Sinclair argued with Lady Constance. Everyone saw him angry. If he turns up dead as well, or if he simply vanishes permanently, then suspicion falls on him. He becomes the perfect scapegoat. The real killer could have murdered Lady Constance and then done something to Dr. Sinclair, making it look like he fled out of guilt. But where is Dr. Sinclair then? That, Sergeant, is what we need to find out. Morrison orders a more thorough search of the grounds, particularly focusing on outbuildings, the lake, and anywhere a body might be concealed. While the search is underway, it's now late afternoon, and the shadows are growing long across the grounds of Willowmere Manor. The inspector is beginning to wonder if Dr. Sinclair somehow managed to get beyond the walls despite the locked gates when a shout comes from the direction of the old rose garden. Morrison and Davies hurry across the lawn to where two constables are standing near an ornate stone fountain that sits in the center of the rose garden. The fountain hasn't been operating for years, and the basin is dry, filled with fallen leaves and debris. But now one of the constables is pointing down into the basin with a pale face. At the bottom of the deep basin, partially covered by leaves, is the body of Dr. Theodore Sinclair. Morrison carefully climbs into the fountain basin. The doctor is lying on his side, his eyes closed, his skin cold. He's dressed in his day clothes, the ones that were missing from his room. Morrison makes a careful examination without moving the body more than necessary. He's been dead for several hours, Morrison announces. Rigor mortis is well established. I'd estimate he died sometime between midnight and 4 in the morning. How did he die, sir? Davies asks from above. Morrison points to the back of the doctor's head. Blunt force trauma. There's a significant depression in the skull here, and blood in the hair. He was struck from behind with something heavy. Could he have fallen into a fountain basin? Not likely. And the injury is consistent with being struck rather than falling. No, Sergeant, this is murder. Someone lured or followed Dr. Sinclair out here and killed him. But why? And who? That's what we need to determine. Morrison climbs out of the fountain and stands looking around the rose garden. It's an enclosed space, surrounded by high hedges, hidden from the house by an ancient yew tree. This is a private spot. You could kill someone here and not be seen from the house, especially in the dark. So our murderer killed Lady Constance and then killed Dr. Sinclair to make it look like he was the murderer. So it appears. The question is, how did they get Dr. Sinclair to come out here in the middle of the night? He must have had a reason. Davies suddenly snaps his fingers. Sir, Miss Worthington said she heard footsteps in the corridor around 2 in the morning. And Mr. Ashworth saw someone at the far end of the corridor around 3 or 4. What if Dr. Sinclair was already dead by then? What if the person they heard was the murderer, coming back from the rose garden? That's excellent reasoning, Sergeant. So our timeline is roughly this. Sometime before 2 in the morning, Dr. Sinclair leaves his room and goes out the back door to the rose garden, where he's killed. The murderer returns to the house between 2 and 4, is heard by Miss Worthington and seen by Mr. Ashworth. Lady Constance dies at some point during this same time period. But how was she killed, sir? We still haven't determined that. Let's go back inside and have another look at her room. I think we missed something important. They return to Lady Constance's bedroom. The body has been removed by now, but everything else remains as it was. Morrison examines the water glass again, sniffing it carefully. The sleeping tablets bottle. The contents of the bedside drawer. And then he finds it, tucked behind the lamp on the bedside table where it wasn't immediately visible. It's a small syringe, the type a doctor would use for injections. It's empty, but there are traces of clear liquid still clinging to the inside of the barrel. There we are, Morrison says with quiet satisfaction. She was injected with something. That's how she was killed. And given that Dr. Sinclair was a physician who carried a medical bag full of drugs, it would be easy for someone to assume he administered the injection. But he was already dead when she died, Davies points out. Exactly. Someone else gave her the injection, using one of Dr. Sinclair's syringes from his medical bag. The murderer created a perfect frame. Dr. Sinclair argues with Lady Constance, is heard making threats, then disappears the same night she's found dead by injection. Everyone would naturally assume he killed her and fled. So who did it, sir? Morrison walks to the window and looks out at the peaceful gardens, now bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Someone who knew about the will changes. Someone who stood to lose significantly if Lady Constance signed the new will. Someone who had access to Dr. Sinclair's medical bag and knew how to use a syringe. And someone who was strong enough and ruthless enough to kill the doctor when he became inconvenient to the plan. He turns back to Davies. I want you to check something. Find out if any of our suspects have medical training or knowledge. And check the doctor's medical bag carefully. See if any drugs are missing, particularly anything that could cause death by injection. While Davies goes to examine the medical bag, Morrison returns to the drawing room where the guests are gathered. They look up anxiously as he enters, their faces drawn with strain and fear. The peaceful country house party has become a nightmare, and they all know that one of them is a murderer. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison says quietly, "I need to inform you that Dr. Sinclair has been found. I'm afraid he's dead, murdered like Lady Constance. This changes everything. The person who killed Lady Constance also killed Dr. Sinclair, almost certainly to make him appear guilty of her murder." There are gasps and exclamations. Eleanor begins to cry quietly. Geoffrey puts his arm around her. The Colonel's face hardens. Penelope leans forward, her writer's mind obviously working through the implications. Clara sits very still, staring at nothing. "I'm going to ask each of you once more, did anyone leave their room last night after retiring? Did anyone see or hear anything that might help us understand what happened?" There's a long silence. Then Clara speaks, her dreamy voice somehow cutting through the tension. "I painted through the night," she says. "Sometimes I do that when inspiration strikes. I heard footsteps several times. Once going down the corridor toward the back stairs. That was around 2 o'clock. And then again, coming back up, perhaps half an hour later. And then, much later, around 4:30 or 5, I heard someone else moving about." "Could you identify who it was?" "No, I didn't look out of my room. I was focused on my painting." "What were you painting, Miss Whitfield?" "The Death of Hope," Clara says simply. "I started it after the argument at dinner." Lady Constance's face, the way she looked when she came out of the library. "I've been working on it all night." Morrison asks to see the painting, and Clara leads him to her room. On an easel by the window is a watercolor portrait of Lady Constance. It's remarkably good, capturing not just her features but also an expression of deep sorrow and fear. The colors are dark, blues and grays, and there's something deeply moving about the work. "You have genuine talent, Miss Whitfield," Morrison says quietly. "Lady Constance thought so too," Clara replies, tears beginning to fall. "She was going to help me. And now she's gone." Morrison returns downstairs, his mind working through the puzzle. Sergeant Davies meets him in the hallway with news from his examination of the medical bag. "Sir, there's a bottle of morphine in the bag, and it's significantly depleted. More than you'd expect from regular medical use. I'd say at least 2 or 3 doses are missing." "Morphine. That would do it. A large enough dose injected directly would cause respiratory failure within minutes. Peaceful, like falling asleep, which explains why there was no struggle. Lady Constance probably never knew what was happening. But sir, who could have done it? Who has medical knowledge?" Morrison ticks off on his fingers. "Dr. Sinclair himself, obviously, but he's eliminated as he was dead before Lady Constance. Geoffrey Ashworth served in the medical corps during the war before his injury. He would know how to give an injection. Eleanor Ashworth is neurasthenic and has been treated by numerous doctors, she might have picked up knowledge. Even Penelope Worthington, who writes medical details in her detective novels, would have researched such things. What about motive, sir? Geoffrey and Eleanor stood to lose most of their inheritance. Clara Whitfield was losing the independence Lady Constance had promised her. Even the servants might have been affected by the will changes, though we don't know the details of all the bequests yet. Morrison makes a decision. I'm going to gather everyone together and lay out what we know. Sometimes, when a murderer hears the facts presented clearly, they make a mistake. They say something that reveals their guilt. Inspector Morrison has everyone assemble in the drawing room as the sun begins to set. The room that was so peaceful and welcoming the previous evening now feels oppressive. The guests sit in various attitudes of anxiety and fear, while the servants stand near the walls. Morrison stands before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, and begins to speak in his calm, methodical voice. Lady Constance Ashworth was murdered in her bed sometime between midnight and 5 o'clock this morning. She was killed by an injection of a lethal dose of morphine, administered while she slept. Dr. Theodore Sinclair was killed between midnight and 4 o'clock this morning by a blow to the head in the rose garden. His body was hidden in the fountain basin. Both murders were committed by the same person. He pauses, letting this sink in. The murderer's plan was clever. Everyone had witnessed Dr. Sinclair arguing with Lady Constance. Everyone knew he was angry. So when Lady Constance was found dead and Dr. Sinclair was missing, the natural assumption would be that he had killed her and fled. But Dr. Sinclair couldn't have killed her, because he was already dead. Morrison walks slowly across the room. The question is, who was the figure glimpsed in the darkness? Who is the killer among us? There's absolute silence. Everyone is holding their breath. At first, I thought it must be someone who stood to lose from the will changes. But as I investigated further, I realized something important. The footsteps heard by Miss Worthington were around 2 in the morning. The figure seen by Mr. Ashworth was around 3 or 4. But Miss Whitfield mentioned hearing someone else moving about around 4:30 or 5. He stops and looks directly at one person. And that's when I understood. There were 2 people moving about that night. The first was the murderer. The second was someone who witnessed something but was afraid to speak. Morrison turns to Mrs. Pemberton. You were awake last night, weren't you? You heard something unusual. The housekeeper's face goes pale. I don't know what you mean, Inspector. I think you do. You're a light sleeper. You've said so yourself. And you do rounds of the house every night. What did you see? Mrs. Pemberton looks around the room at all the faces watching her, then back at Morrison. Finally, she speaks, her voice barely above a whisper. I saw someone coming up from the kitchen around 5 in the morning. They had been outside. Their clothes were damp from the dew. Who was it? I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that someone in this house could do such a thing. Who was it, Mrs. Pemberton? She raises a shaking hand and points. It was Hastings. Everyone turns to look at the butler, who has been standing quietly by the door throughout all the interviews. Hastings doesn't move, doesn't change expression. But something in his eyes shifts, a calculation being made. Mrs. Pemberton is mistaken, he says calmly. I was in my quarters all night. No, Mrs. Pemberton says, her voice stronger now. I saw you. You were coming up the back stairs. Your shoes were muddy. And there was something on your hands. Something dark. Morrison walks closer to the butler. It was you, wasn't it, Hastings? You killed both Dr. Sinclair and Lady Constance. For a long moment, the butler says nothing. Then, slowly, as though the words are being dragged from him against his will, he speaks. He was nothing to me. But Lady Constance was everything. The room goes very still. I've served this house for 30 years, Hastings continues, his voice low and controlled but with emotion beneath. I've watched over Lady Constance, protected her, cared for this place as though it were my own. When Sir Edmund died, I thought. I hoped. But of course, a butler could never aspire to anything beyond service. I knew my place. I was content just to be near her, to serve her, to make her life comfortable. But then Dr. Sinclair started coming around more often. Making demands. Pressuring her about her will. I could see how distressed she was, how his visits upset her. And that night, when they argued, I heard everything. I was in the hall, and I heard every word. He was trying to force her to maintain his bequest in her will. £5,000 for his worthless son's debts. And when she refused, he threatened her. He said if she didn't sign papers giving him power of attorney over some property they owned jointly, he would reveal a secret that would ruin her reputation. Morrison leans forward. What secret? Years ago, before Lady Constance married Sir Edmund, she and Dr. Sinclair were engaged. They had planned to marry. But then she discovered she was expecting a child. Dr. Sinclair's child. He refused to marry her immediately, said it would look improper, that they should wait. But she couldn't wait. The scandal would have destroyed her family. So she broke off the engagement and married Sir Edmund quickly instead. She told him the truth, and he agreed to raise the child as his own. There are gasps around the room. The child died in infancy, Hastings continues. Lady Constance grieved terribly. And she never forgave Dr. Sinclair for abandoning her when she needed him most. But he kept the secret all these years, and now he was threatening to reveal it unless she gave him what he wanted. He didn't care that it would destroy her reputation. He only cared about his wastrel son's debts. So you decided to kill him, Morrison says. I decided to remove the threat to her. I sent him a note saying Lady Constance wanted to meet him, to reconcile. He came, fool that he was. And I struck him down. The world is better off without him. And Lady Constance? Hastings's face shows real pain now. I would never harm her. I loved her. I went to her room after dealing with Dr. Sinclair. I wanted to make sure she was safe, that she was sleeping peacefully. But when I entered her room, she was awake. She had heard me in the corridor, and she was sitting up in bed. She saw me. She saw the blood on my hands. He closes his eyes, remembering. She knew immediately what I had done. She looked at me with such horror, such disgust. She said she would call the police, have me arrested. She reached for the bell pull to summon help. I panicked. I saw Dr. Sinclair's medical bag in the hall, where I'd taken it from his room to stage the scene. I grabbed the morphine and syringe. I told her I was sorry, that I had done it for her. She screamed, but quietly, not wanting to wake the house. We struggled. And then I administered the injection. His voice breaks. She fought me at first, but the morphine works quickly. She stopped struggling. Her eyes closed. I laid her back on the pillows and arranged her peacefully, as though she had simply gone to sleep. I told her I loved her. I hope she heard me. I hope in those last moments, she understood that everything I did was for her. The confession hangs in the air like a physical thing. Morrison nods slowly. Hastings, I'm arresting you for the murders of Dr. Theodore Sinclair and Lady Constance Ashworth. The butler doesn't resist as Davies moves forward with handcuffs. He allows himself to be restrained with the same dignity he brought to all his duties. As he's led away, he pauses at the door and looks back at the room where he served for so many years. I would do it all again, he says quietly. For her, I would do anything. Then he's gone, and the house falls into exhausted silence. The next morning dawns clear and beautiful, as though the horrors of the past 2 days had never happened. But of course, they did happen, and Willowmere Manor is forever changed. Inspector Morrison has concluded his investigation. Hastings has been taken away to await trial. Dr. Sinclair's body has been removed by the police. Lady Constance's body has been released to the family for burial arrangements. The guests gather one last time in the drawing room. The atmosphere is somber but also oddly relieved. The tension of not knowing, of suspecting one another, has been lifted. Geoffrey sits with Eleanor, holding her hand. They have much to discuss, about their future now that Lady Constance is gone. Their inheritance under the old will stands, modest but sufficient. They will manage. Clara sits by the window, sketching in her notebook. She's drawing the gardens in sunlight, flowers and trees and beauty, trying to replace the dark images of violence with something peaceful. Her bequest of £500 will give her a year or 2 of independence. Perhaps she can make her art pay in that time. Penelope is making notes for a new novel. This experience, terrible as it was, has given her material for a story about the dangerous nature of obsessive love. She'll change the details, of course, make it fiction. But the emotional truth will be there. The Colonel stands by the fireplace, thinking about Lady Constance, about the woman he knew and cared for. He's thinking about the butler who loved her so obsessively that he killed for her. Tomorrow he'll return to London. He'll attend Lady Constance's funeral when the time comes. And then he'll return to his quiet life, carrying his memories with him. Inspector Morrison makes his final rounds, ensuring that everything is in order. He speaks briefly with each guest, assuring them that they're free to leave, that they'll be called upon if needed for the trial. He pauses in the entrance hall, looking around at the beautiful house that was the scene of such tragedy. In his long career, he's seen many crimes of passion, many murders committed in the name of love. But there's always something especially sad about them, the way love can become twisted into something dark and terrible. Mrs. Pemberton is already organizing the household, bringing order back to Willowmere. The maids are cleaning, removing all traces of the police investigation. Life goes on, as it always does, even after tragedy. By mid-afternoon, the guests begin to depart. Geoffrey and Eleanor are driven to the station. The Colonel arranges for his car. Clara drifts off like a ghost. Penelope is the last to leave, pausing at the front door to look back. "It was a beautiful place once," she says to Mrs. Pemberton. I hope it can be beautiful again. It will be, miss, the housekeeper replies firmly. This house has seen joy and sorrow for hundreds of years. It will survive this too. Inspector Morrison drives away as the sun begins to set. He looks in his rearview mirror at Willowmere Manor, growing smaller in the distance. The honey-colored stone glows warmly in the fading light. The swans on the lake are settling for the night. Peace is returning to the estate, slowly but surely. In time, the scandal will fade. The story will become part of the house's history. Lady Constance will be remembered for her kindness and generosity, not for the manner of her death. Dr. Sinclair will be forgotten. And Hastings will spend the rest of his life in prison, still believing that he did the right thing, still loving a woman who never loved him back. But that's tomorrow's story. For now, as the evening draws in and the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, Willowmere Manor rests. The rooms are quiet. The gardens are peaceful. The lake reflects the first stars like diamonds scattered on black velvet. And somewhere in the house, perhaps in the library, or in Lady Constance's bedroom that has now been cleaned and aired and made fresh again, there's a sense of peace. A sense that despite everything, despite the violence and tragedy, the house itself endures. It has seen death before and will see death again. But it has also seen love, and joy, and beauty. And those things endure too. Let yourself rest now, dear listener. Let the peace of Willowmere settle over you like a soft blanket. The mystery is solved. Justice has been served. The guilty have been caught, the innocent freed. You can let go of the tension, of the worry, of the need to solve the puzzle. Close your eyes and imagine yourself in the gardens of Willowmere on a peaceful morning. The sun is warm on your face. Birds are singing. Bees hum lazily among the flowers. The lake sparkles in the distance. Everything is calm, everything is safe, everything is well. The events of those terrible 2 days fade like a bad dream on waking. What remains is the beauty of the place, the comfort of the rooms, the gentle rhythm of country life. Time moves slowly here, as it always has. Days pass in a pleasant blur of sunshine and shadow, of meals and walks, of quiet conversation and peaceful solitude. Let yourself sink into this feeling of peace now. Your breathing slows and deepens. Your body relaxes, tension draining away like water. Your mind quiets, thoughts becoming slower, softer, like leaves drifting on a still pond. The story is over. The mystery is solved. You can rest now, safe and comfortable, knowing that all is well. The house stands peacefully in its gardens. The roses bloom. The swans glide on the lake. The sun rises and sets in its eternal rhythm. And you, dear listener, you can sleep. Deeply, peacefully, safely. Let the gentle atmosphere of Willowmere carry you down into rest. Let your mind go quiet. Let your body go still. Let sleep come softly, naturally, easily. The manor sleeps too, in its own way. The house settles into nighttime quiet. Clocks tick softly. Floorboards creak gently as they cool. Outside, nocturnal creatures go about their business. An owl hoots from the old oak tree. A fox barks in the distance. These are the sounds of peace, of the natural world continuing its rhythms undisturbed. Sleep now. Let go. The story is complete. The ending has come. And in the morning, when you wake, you'll carry with you only the peaceful memory of Willowmere Manor as it should be, a place of beauty, of calm, of gentle country living. Sweet dreams, dear listener. May your sleep be as peaceful as a summer evening at Willowmere, as calm as the lake at sunset, as gentle as the breeze through the rose garden. Rest now. Sleep deeply. All is well.